The sun crests the horizon, a sharp line of white fire that slices through the morning haze. It hits the outer rim of the LittyVerse first. The light catches the glass and metal, turning the purple and gold towers into jagged monuments of heat and reflection. Slowly, the glow crawls down the vertical faces of the skyscrapers, chasing the shadows into the deep canyons of the grid below. Where the light touches, the city responds. Sensors flicker, circuits heat up, and the dormant energy of the metropolis begins to hum. It is a slow, rhythmic pulse that starts in the foundations and climbs to the highest antenna. The shadows retreat toward the sea, leaving the entire skyline exposed in a brilliant synthetic glare. This is not just a city at daybreak, it is a machine reaching full operational capacity. Every surface acts as a mirror, catching the dawn and throwing it back into the atmosphere. The scale is absolute, stretching from the coastline to the clouds. A massive, interconnected web of logic and light finally coming to life under the morning sky. The transition is seamless. The darkness of the night is discarded, and the vibrant, neon reality of the city asserts its dominance over the landscape, ready for the day to begin. The morning light now saturates the grid, and with it, the arterial flow of the city begins. Between the towering peaks, the transport craft emerge in synchronized swarms. They glide through the narrow corridors like schools of fish navigating a complex reef, shifting direction with fluid, calculated precision. There is no gridlock here, only a constant, rhythmic pulse of movement. Each vessel banks around the corners of the skyscrapers, banking on invisible tracks of magnetic guidance. Below, the city architecture channels this traffic into designated lanes, creating a mesmerizing ballet of motion that defies gravity. The air fills with the low, steady hum of propulsion drives, a sound that vibrates through the very glass of the nearby towers. From the vantage point above, the craft appear as tiny, glowing streaks of color, tracing lines of intent through the urban canyons. They weave, climb, and descend in perfect unison, responding to the automated demands of the central network. This is the circulatory system of the LittyVerse, a relentless display of efficiency where every movement is measured, every path is optimized, and the entire city breathes as one singular, living entity in motion. The kinetic flow of the city is suddenly eclipsed by a new, brilliant saturation. Across every vertical surface, the holographic billboards crackle and ignite. They do not merely glow, they erupt. Massive streams of violet and gold light wash over the streets, turning the morning air into a canvas of shifting data. One moment, a skyscraper face displays a live, high-stakes esports arena, its fighters towering hundreds of feet high. A second later, the image ripples and dissolves into a complex AI-driven tutorial, cascading lines of code dancing in the air like falling rain. The sheer volume of information is immense. Creator streams flicker to life in windows the size of city blocks, broadcasting faces and voices that echo through the canyons. The light from these projections is so intense that it bleeds into the shadows, erasing the distinction between glass architecture and digital projection. Every corner of the skyline is now a screen, bombarding the senses with vibrant, hyper-realistic content. It is a constant, flickering torrent of entertainment, a digital overlay that has become the primary layer of the city reality. The skyline is no longer just metal and stone. It is a living, breathing broadcast network, pulsing with the collective imagination of millions, asserting its presence through pure, high-definition light. The sky above the megacity yields. The camera tilts downward, abandoning the high-altitude calm, and begins a vertical plummet through the cloud layer. Gravity pulls the frame faster, turning the distant towers into blurring streaks of purple and gold. As the clouds break, the scale of the city reveals itself in a sudden, violent expansion of geometry. The grid arrives in a rush of wind and light. Buildings that appeared as singular pillars from above now resolve into massive, multi-tiered labyrinths of steel and glass. The camera weaves between the structures, dropping into the deep canyons where the air feels heavy with the vibration of the city. Down here, the perspective shifts. The ground is a complex web of intersections and transit lines, teeming with movement that feels intimate and overwhelming at once. The light changes from the diffuse glare of the clouds to the intense, localized neon glow of the street-level displays. Every direction is filled with the sheer mass of the infrastructure. The camera levels out, threading the needle between two massive towers, capturing the relentless pace of the ground-level activity. This is the heart of the LittyVerse, where the scale is no longer an abstract concept, but a physical reality that demands total attention. The camera drifts through the dense intersections, slowing as it passes rows of dormant, ancient hardware. These are the relics of the old world, the abandoned servers and failed blueprints that once defined the limits of urban growth. For years, the consensus was clear. The engineers, the architects, the critics, they all pointed to the void and called it permanent. They insisted that a city built on the intersection of pure imagination and digital infrastructure was a mathematical absurdity. They drew lines in the sand and built fences around their own lack of vision. They said it was impossible to build a city around creators, technology, entertainment, and imagination. The narrator's voice cuts through the ambient hum of the grid, steady and sharp. Every flickering light in this district serves as a direct rebuttal to those claims. The defiance is built into the steel, encoded into the foundations, and projected across the skyline. What they once labeled as a fantasy has become a tangible, living reality. The skeptics have been replaced by the sheer momentum of a million creators proving the impossible wrong, hour by hour. This is not just a city, it is a monument to the rejection of impossible. The foundation holds, the lights remain, and the skeptics are long gone. The camera pulls away from the dense grid, ascending toward the center of the metropolis. Rising above the lower tiers, a singular monolith dominates the horizon. This is the LittyVerse Tower. Unlike the static steel of the surrounding skyscrapers, this structure defies the permanence of its frame. Its surface is not made of glass or concrete, but of light. The exterior ripples like a vast vertical ocean of information. Waves of data surge across the panels, turning the facade into a living, breathing tapestry of global connectivity. Every pulse of the light corresponds to a stream, a trade, or a project being launched within the city. The tower acts as a massive, central nervous system, drawing raw energy from the earth and broadcasting it back out as refined inspiration. A stream of blue light cascades down the north face, tracing the path of a live broadcast, while a flash of gold erupts near the crown to signal a new innovation record. The geometry of the tower shifts in real time, adjusting its form to accommodate the flow of incoming data. It is a lighthouse for the digital age, constantly updating, constantly processing, and constantly illuminating the path for every creator below. The hum of the tower vibrates through the very air, a low-frequency reminder that the heart of this city is not just built, but actively thinking. The camera descends, tracing the descent of the light from the tower's crown down to the foundation. The scale of the structure is immense, dwarfing the surrounding transit lanes and the thousands of automated craft weaving through the lower levels. At the very base, where the data streams hit the pavement, the movement of the city pauses. A figure stands alone against the pulsing glow. He does not move with the frantic pace of the crowds nearby. He stands fixed, his gaze directed upward, tracking the ripple of information as it cascades down the vertical expanse of the monolith. The light from the surface washes over him, casting sharp, shifting shadows against the ground. He reaches out, pressing a palm against the threshold where the tower meets the plaza. The data flow reacts to the contact, the patterns of light swirling and intensifying around his hand. This is the pivot point of the metropolis. Every broadcast, every stream, and every digital pulse originates from the tension between the massive, shifting architecture and the quiet intent of the person standing at its root. He watches the progress of the city as if it were a physical weight, his stance firm, effectively grounding the vast, abstract ambition of the LittyVerse into a singular, human focal point. The city moves around him, but he remains the still center, observing the architecture he helped initiate. Litty lowers his hand from the tower base, the lingering light tracing the lines of his palm. He speaks, his voice cutting through the low-frequency hum of the plaza. This city never sleeps. As the words leave his lips, the rhythm of the tower shifts. The data streams, previously swirling in contained patterns, begin to surge outward with renewed velocity. They break away from the central monolith like pressurized liquid, streaming through the air in glowing, rhythmic conduits. The light travels horizontally, piercing the darkness of the surrounding streets. Every pulse of the tower now dictates the tempo of the city. The energy feeds into the infrastructure, powering the grid, illuminating the transit lanes, and syncing the holographic displays across the horizon. Litty watches the flow, his eyes tracking the light as it disappears into the distance. The pavement beneath his feet vibrates with the increased output. It is a constant, relentless cycle of input and production. There is no pause, no downtime, and no silence. The architecture responds to the surge, with secondary towers flickering to life in sequence, catching the energy and reflecting it further into the sprawl. He observes the unfolding mechanism, confirming that the city has moved beyond a mere structure into a state of perpetual autonomous motion. The energy conduits tear across the skyline, converging on the LITtv district. They strike the power arrays of the plaza, and the grid erupts. Giant screens, towering dozens of stories high, flicker to life in a synchronized wave. The sudden brightness washes out the ambient neon, turning the plaza into a landscape of stark, shifting light. Below the displays, the movement of the city changes. The flow of transit, the rush of foot traffic, and the mechanical pulse of the streets all hit a sudden, collective friction. Pedestrians stop mid-stride. Thousands of eyes turn upward to the massive panels. The screens dominate the horizon, creating a wall of color that blocks out the rest of the skyline. Data streams transform into vivid, high-definition broadcasts that fill the entire field of vision. The air grows heavy with the hum of thousands of microprocessors working in tandem. People crowd toward the base of the screens, pressing against the railings, their faces lit by the rhythmic flashing of the broadcasts. The scale of the screens makes the surrounding architecture feel like a frame for the content. It is no longer just a district, it is an immersion chamber. The crowd watches in total silence, captivated by the sheer volume of the imagery, as the giant screens hold the entire plaza in a state of absolute digital attention. The screens shift from static broadcasts to a fluid, synchronized animation sequence that ripples through the entire district. It starts with a single golden pulse that dances across the interconnected monitors, forcing every head in the plaza to track its path. As the animation accelerates, it weaves through the architecture, turning the buildings into a singular, living canvas. The crowd moves with the light, their collective posture shifting as they follow the sweeping trajectories of the digital art. Thousands of individuals, once distinct, now lean and turn in perfect harmony, drawn into the rhythm of the display. The animations break into complex geometric patterns that fold and unfold, creating the illusion of deep, infinite space above the plaza. The air vibrates with the synchronized audio, a low-frequency hum that matches the pulse of the light. People reach out, hands raised as if to touch the shimmering data hovering in the air. This is no longer just observation. It is a shared experience of digital wonder. The boundaries between the viewers and the broadcast dissolve. Every face in the crowd is illuminated by the same shifting colors, reflecting a unified state of awe. The city has successfully synchronized the imagination of its inhabitants, turning the plaza into a single entity pulsing to the beat of the LittyVerse. The fluid grace of the animations snaps into sharp, jagged lines as the screens transition. A countdown flickers in crimson across every monitor. The esports battle has begun. The plaza transforms into a high-stakes arena where every millisecond counts. On the screens, avatars clash in bursts of digital fire and tactical maneuvers, the pace accelerating until the motion is a blur of light. The crowd reacts instantly. The collective awe of moments ago vanishes, replaced by a jagged, sharp-edged tension. Heads tilt, eyes widen, and breaths hitch in unison with the game's momentum. When a team executes a perfect flank, the stadium lights flare in victory, bathing the spectators in blinding white. The tension in the air is palpable. One spectator grips the metal railing, knuckles white, tracking a high-velocity projectile across the screen. Another leans forward, jaw set, mirroring the precise movements of the players. The screens display real-time analytics, cascading stats that spill over the edges of the monitors. The competition is fierce, the stakes are visible in the shifting scoreboards, and the spectators are no longer just watching. They are leaning into the fight, their focus narrowed to the singular, glowing point of the match. The plaza has become a pressure cooker, fueled by the relentless intensity of the battle on the grid. The roar of the esports stadium fades into the background, leaving behind a persistent, rhythmic thrum that rises from the ground. It is the deep bass of the city, a constant frequency that travels through the souls of every boot and the foundations of every structure. Beneath the plaza, the pavement feels alive. Tiny ripples of dust dance across the concrete, disturbed by the relentless low-end pulse that defines the LittyVerse heartbeat. This is not just sound, it is kinetic energy, a physical manifestation of the city's internal clock. A loose metal grate near the edge of the walk rattles in perfect synchronization with the beat. People standing on the street stop, shifting their weight to lean into the vibration, their movements instinctively falling in line with the city's cadence. The air feels heavy with the weight of this resonance, as if the very atoms of the district are vibrating in place. Every step taken on this ground is a dialogue with the architecture itself. The oscillation is steady, unyielding, and powerful, turning the entire surface of the district into a massive, living speaker. It is the rhythmic pulse that keeps the lights burning and the data flowing, a silent engine that the inhabitants feel long before they acknowledge it. The ground continues to tremble, a steady, mechanical throb that anchors the entire city in the present moment. The rhythmic thrum of the pavement begins to thin, replaced by a low-frequency whine of high-speed transport craft passing overhead. The camera surges upward, breaking away from the street-level vibrations to capture the sprawling horizon. The city skyline shifts, widening into a vast, open expanse dominated by steel and light. Ahead, the horizon is punctuated by massive, circular silhouettes rising above the surrounding grid. These are the monuments to competition, structures of immense scale that dwarf everything in their vicinity. The camera accelerates, cutting through the haze of light and motion, drawing closer to the immense curves of the sports district. Each stadium stands as a distinct landmark, a massive shell designed to house thousands. The surfaces of these arenas catch the shifting neon, reflecting gold and purple against the darkening sky. The structures appear solid, immovable, and imposing, casting long, sharp shadows across the lower levels of the city. As the camera glides closer, the scale becomes overwhelming, turning the surrounding towers into mere background noise. These are not just buildings, they are the anchors of the district, crafted for the singular purpose of human and digital achievement. The air here feels thinner, energized by the proximity to these massive, silent shells, waiting for the surge of activity that inevitably follows the rising sun. The scale is absolute, and the destination is now clearly in sight. The massive shells of the arenas dominate the field of vision, their surfaces beginning to shift. A football stadium to the left ignites, its exterior flooding with deep sapphire and emerald light, marking the primary colors of the home squad. Seconds later, the adjacent boxing dome responds, bathing the surrounding plaza in a harsh, aggressive crimson. This is the visual language of the district. The colors are not static, they ripple across the metallic panels of the structures, moving in waves that mirror the intensity of the incoming competition. A hum of electricity fills the space between the buildings, a high-pitched whine that signifies the activation of the containment fields. Inside these domes, the air is already heavy. The light reflecting off the ground is blinding, turning the plaza into a kaleidoscope of shifting team identities. Every surface, from the polished walkways to the transparent transit tubes, catches the glow. The atmosphere is thick with expectation, a palpable pressure that forces the few pedestrians below to pause and look up. The light pulse quickens, a countdown of color that signals the start of the event is only moments away. The district feels suspended in a breath before a scream, the silence of the massive structures contrasting sharply with the electric violence of the shifting colors. Everything is primed for the inevitable clash. The silence breaks. High above the plazas, the giant holographic scoreboards flicker, then sharpen into brilliant, high-definition displays. Columns of blue and gold data begin to cascade down the surfaces, broadcasting live performance metrics and player statistics at blinding speed. Numbers shift and blur as the competition intensifies, tracking every heartbeat and every tactical move made inside the arenas. The scoreboards are not just displays, they are the pulse of the district. As the stats climb, the air begins to hum with a new, heavier resonance. Suddenly, the roar of the crowd erupts from the domes, a physical force that cascades down the stadium walls and spills into the streets. It is a massive, unified sound, echoing off the glass and steel, vibrating through the pavement with the weight of thousands of spectators. The pressure is immediate. Every pedestrian stops, drawn into the shared intensity of the moment. The light from the scoreboards pulses in time with the cheering, casting long, rhythmic flashes across the plaza floor. The sound builds, layering wave upon wave, until the entire district feels like a single, living organism reacting to the high-stakes battle unfolding within the walls. There is no room for distraction now. The data is live, the crowd is deafening, and the weight of the competition hangs in the air, thick and inescapable. The focus narrows. The roar of the stadium fades into a dull background thrum as the camera sweeps toward the coastline race circuit. At the starting line, a hypercar waits, its frame low and still against the dark asphalt. It is a machine of pure intent, poised at the edge of the water. The air around the rear vents begins to shimmer with heat. A high-pitched whine starts, barely audible at first, then climbing in frequency until it vibrates through the ground. The car is not just idling, it is priming its power systems. Panels along the chassis shift slightly, adjusting for aerodynamics, locking into place with a series of sharp, metallic clicks. Sensors sweep the track ahead, projecting a faint laser path onto the pavement. The engine note deepens, transitioning from a mechanical hum to a guttural, hungry growl that threatens to shatter the surrounding silence. The driver sits motionless, hands locked to the controls. Every system check cycles through the cockpit displays, illuminating the interior in rapid bursts of amber and white. The heat waves intensify, distorting the view of the horizon. The car leans forward, suspension tightening, weight shifting to the front tires. The whine reaches a piercing, final pitch, a sustained note of pure kinetic potential. The countdown is gone. The car is ready to break the world. The launch is violent. The hypercar surges forward, crossing the starting line before the sound of its departure catches up. It hits the first hairpin at a speed that defies physics. As the nose dives into the turn, the driver snaps the wheel, and the rear end breaks loose. A cloud of thick, acrid smoke erupts from the rear tires, instantly shrouding the track. The car enters the drift at an impossible angle, sliding sideways toward the outer guardrail. For a heartbeat, the machine teeters on the edge of the cliff, the outer wheels inches from the drop-off. The engine note shifts, screaming as the tires struggle for purchase against the asphalt. Through the smoke, the vehicle pivots, the chassis vibrating under the extreme lateral force. Then, the grip returns. The car snaps back into alignment with a violent jerk, tires biting deep into the track. It rockets out of the corner, the smoke trailing behind like a long, gray ribbon. The acceleration is relentless, pushing the car toward the next bend before the heat from the first one has even dissipated. It is a display of absolute control, a masterclass in momentum where every millisecond of friction is calculated and exploited. The drift was not just a maneuver, it was a statement of dominance over the circuit. High above the coastline, a swarm of drones descends, locking their sensors onto the hypercar. They move in perfect formation, matching the vehicle's velocity with mechanical precision. Every movement, every twitch of the steering, and every plume of smoke is captured in high definition. The data streams upward, hitting the orbital relay and bouncing back down instantly. Across the LittyVerse, The massive holographic billboards shift. The live sports feeds cut to the aerial view of the chase. In the city plazas, the crowds stop mid-stride. Every eye turns to the towering displays. The hypercar is no longer just a vehicle on a track. It is the center of a city-wide event. A technical glitch ripples through the feed as the car breaks a new speed threshold, but the drones adjust, recalibrating their focus in a fraction of a second. The signal stabilizes, sharper than before. The roar of the car's engine is amplified, piped directly into the plazas through the city's acoustic grid. The rhythm of the city pulses in time with the racing pistons. Thousands of spectators watch the drift live, their collective focus tethered to the blue and gold streak on their screens. The rush is contagious. The pursuit is not just being watched, it is being experienced by every citizen, turning the coastline into the heart of the grid. High above the track, the viewing platform remains perfectly still while the world below accelerates. Litty stands at the edge of the glass, his gaze fixed on the hypercar as it tears through the final sector of the coastline circuit. The vehicle is a blur of motion, carving through the air with surgical precision. Beside him, a vertical array of data streams cascades in midair, showing G-force readings, tire temperature fluctuations, and engine output. He tracks the numbers with a rhythmic cadence, his eyes moving in sync with the car's trajectory. As the machine streaks past the platform, a sonic boom ripples through the air, vibrating the glass beneath his palms. He watches the car vanish into the next bend. He leans forward slightly, checking the delta between the current time and the track record. The figures lock into place, confirming the performance. A faint, satisfied expression crosses his face. He tilts his head, a single, sharp nod of approval acknowledging the efficiency of the display. The speed is absolute. The engineering holds. He turns his attention back to the cascading data, already calculating the next iteration. Everything is working exactly as designed. Litty watches the streak of light dissipate into the horizon. He speaks into the interface, his voice calm amidst the mechanical roar. In LittyVerse, speed became entertainment. The broadcast feed shifts, showing the car pushing deep into the final stretch, the engine note rising to an ear-splitting frequency. The track surface glows under the friction, heat waves distorting the view of the coastline. The crowd in the plaza mirrors this intensity. They are no longer just spectators, they are part of the engine's rhythm. The car hits a curve, the chassis vibrating as it fights the momentum. A warning light pulses on the central control hub, indicating the vehicle is operating beyond standard safety protocols. The system doesn't throttle back, it optimizes, diverting more power to the drivetrain to maintain the velocity. Litty observes the spike in data, his hands moving to stabilize the stream. The hypercar drifts, tires screaming against the synthetic pavement, a perfect arc of calculated chaos. The city is a conduit for this energy, amplifying the danger and the precision until they are indistinguishable. The finish line looms, a shimmering gate of light. Every sensor in the district peaks. The speed is absolute, and for the citizens watching, it is the only thing that matters. The roar of the race circuit collapses into a low, rhythmic hum that vanishes as the camera drifts away from the sports district. The transition is instantaneous. One moment, the air is thick with friction and the smell of burnt rubber. The next, it is cool, steady, and silent. The hypercar and the grandstands retreat, replaced by the soft, rhythmic pulsing of the coastline. Here, the ground is white sand, meticulously calibrated to remain at a constant, comfortable temperature. Glowing palm trees stand at intervals along the shore, their fronds swaying in a breeze that feels engineered for perfection. The water is a deep, tranquil blue, lapping against the shore without the chaotic turbulence of the city center. It is an artificial oasis designed to purge the adrenaline of the speedway. There is no urgency in the shifting light, only a slow, deliberate cycle of color reflecting off the surface of the artificial ocean. The shift is complete. The tension of the high-stakes race has been replaced by a deliberate, manufactured calm, proving that this environment can sustain both the absolute peak of friction and the absolute depth of stillness. The city breathes, exhaling the heat of the race into the quiet expanse of the beach. The tranquility of the artificial beach is short-lived. Above the floating restaurants anchored just offshore, the sky begins to fracture. A single brilliant white light streaks upward, detonating into a sprawling canopy of gold and violet sparks. The sound follows a heartbeat later, a low, resonant thrum that vibrates through the sand and the water alike. These are not merely pyrotechnics, they are choreographed bursts of plasma, timed to the city's deep underlying rhythms. Each explosion sends ripples across the dark surface of the artificial ocean, turning the water into a shimmering mirror of the chaos above. People on the shore pause, their faces upturned, watching the display fracture and reform in complex geometric patterns. The light is blinding, washing out the soft glow of the palm trees and painting the surroundings in sharp, fleeting shadows. As one cluster of fireworks fades, another ignites, more intense than the last. The display is a physical manifestation of the city's success, loud, radiant, and impossible to ignore. Each burst illuminates the horizon, revealing the scale of the floating dining platforms and the distant, glowing silhouette of the metropolis. The air hums with the residual energy of the blasts, a constant, flickering reminder that even in its moments of leisure, this city operates at the edge of brilliance. The sky above the beach dims as the display concludes, and the camera pivots, pulling back from the water. The horizon shifts. Gone are the floating restaurants and the soft white sand. In their place, a new skyline rises, defined by sharp angles and colossal, interconnected structures. This is the LittyVerse Academy. The architecture here is fundamentally different. It does not pulse with the neon warmth of the entertainment district, but with the cold, precise glow of data streams. Massive research towers dominate the landscape, their surfaces etched with cascading code that flows like ink down the glass. These are not buildings for spectators, but for architects of the future. The camera glides between the central spires, capturing the sheer scale of the intellectual engine that powers the city. Each tower is a self-contained hub of processing power, vibrating with the quiet intensity of trillions of calculations per second. The air here is different, sharper, focused, and devoid of the chaotic music of the plazas. It is a place of absolute structure. Below, the foundations of these towers sink deep into the bedrock of the city, anchoring the entire digital ecosystem. This is the intellectual core, the silent brain that sustains the light, the speed, and the life of the world above. Every pulse of energy that fuels the city originates here, in the quiet, calculating heart of the academy. Inside these towers, the quiet gives way to the hum of high-frequency fabrication. The camera descends into the primary innovation halls, where the atmosphere is thick with the scent of ozone and heated metal. Rows of students sit at open-air stations, their hands moving in fluid, rhythmic patterns against holographic interfaces. A student gestures, and a multi-jointed robotic arm across the room mirrors the motion with exact precision, lifting a delicate circuit board from a tray. This is not mere study, it is a live laboratory of creation. Another group huddles around a central pedestal, watching a skeletal frame assemble itself from raw components, guided by real-time neural feedback. The narrator notes, "What started as an academy became a full educational civilization." The distinction between teacher and practitioner has vanished. Every classroom operates like a development firm, where complex robotics and artificial intelligence are refined in real time. Students adjust the parameters of their projects, watching the code rewrite itself on the surrounding walls. The scale of the work is staggering, spanning from microscopic neural links to heavy-duty industrial automatons. There is no downtime here. The cycle of learning feeds directly into the expansion of the city itself. Every lesson mastered results in a new update to the grid, proving that knowledge is the primary currency of this world. The labs do not end at a wall. They bleed outward into the residential creator communities, dissolving the boundary between work and home. The camera drifts past the final glass partition of the robotics bay and steps directly onto a suspended walkway. Below, a park stretches like a verdant vein through the metallic grid, its grass glowing with bioluminescent spores that track the footsteps of passers-by. Smart apartments flank the greenery, their exterior panels shifting color to match the mood of the inhabitants within. A student steps out from a research hub, pauses to adjust a digital interface on her wrist, and walks straight into a public transit pod docked within the garden. There is no commute here. The infrastructure is a single, breathing organism. Residents work from terraces that overlook the fabrication floors, and public parks serve as open-air brainstorming zones. Children play near kinetic sculptures that harvest energy from their movement to power the nearby labs. The ecosystem is closed, efficient, and entirely self-sustaining. Innovation is not a task performed in isolation, but the very foundation of the neighborhood. Every apartment window looks out onto the tools of future progress, and every park bench is wired for global connectivity. This is a landscape where life and invention move in perfect, synchronized step. The sun dips below the horizon, and the city does not darken, it transforms. As the natural light retreats, the grid responds with an immediate, synchronized surge of voltage. Every tower ignites in a cascade of violet and gold, turning the skyline into a living circuit board. The shift is physical, a low-frequency thrum that vibrates through the pavement and up into the foundations of the residential hubs. This is the moment the city reaches its social apex. Across the highest tiers of the megastructures, rooftop platforms burst into activity. Thousands of lights pulse in rhythm with the subterranean beat of the district. Holographic projectors deploy, casting streams of color that weave between the buildings, turning the atmosphere itself into a canvas. Music, heavy with bass and synthetic melody, pours from the open-air venues, drowning out the residual noise of the workday. Drone light shows rise like swarms of fireflies, rearranging themselves into complex geometries that hover above the partygoers. On every terrace, the energy is frantic and focused. People move through the light, their silhouettes flickering against the massive, glowing data tapestries of the skyscrapers. The calm of the academic day has been replaced by a high-octane celebration of presence and connection. The intensity does not just build, it floods the entire grid, confirming that in this city, the night is the loudest, brightest expression of life. Litty turns away from the pulse of the terrace, finding a service lift that climbs the exterior spine of the central tower. The platform ascends rapidly, leaving the dense, shimmering crowd behind. The base, once a physical weight against his chest, begins to thin, replaced by the rush of wind at this altitude. He steps onto the highest observation deck, a narrow platform of polished carbon fiber jutting out into the open air. Below him, the grid of the LittyVerse sprawls toward every horizon, a vast web of interconnected light that pulses in time with the city's internal clock. From this vantage point, the individual parties look like flickering embers caught in a sea of violet and gold. He walks to the very edge, his boots clicking on the metal grating. He does not look back at the lift. He fixes his gaze on the total expanse of the skyline, watching how the data streams flow like rivers between the megastructures. The height is absolute, and the isolation is sharp. He stands motionless, a single dark silhouette cast against the brilliant, artificial aurora of the metropolis. The wind tugs at his hair, but he remains anchored, his eyes tracing the lines of the city he helped manifest. He is the observer at the center of the storm, watching the future he built breathe in the dark. The air at this height is thin and carries the faint, ionized scent of the city's power core. Litty adjusts his stance, his movements slow and deliberate against the backdrop of 1,000 pulsing skyscrapers. He does not look down at the individual streets or the movement of the transit craft. Instead, he looks toward the horizon where the grid meets the edge of the world. He speaks, and his voice is steady, lacking the roar of the crowds below. "They often asked me why we pushed this far," he says. "They thought we were building a fortress to hide from the shifts in the world, a place to insulate ourselves from the chaos of reality." He pauses, watching a wave of light travel across the skyline, a ripple of data moving through the city's nervous system. But they were wrong. He presses his hand against the cold railing, feeling the vibration of the entire structure beneath his touch. We did not build this place to escape the future. We built it to create a better one. The statement hangs in the stillness of the high altitude, a final assertion of purpose. Below, the city continues its rhythmic thrum, oblivious to the silence at the center of its peak, serving as a testament to the vision he brought to life. The camera begins to recede from the summit, pulling away from the lone figure at the apex. As the distance increases, the individual towers lose their distinct profiles, blending into a dense, sprawling network of violet and gold energy. The roar of the city, once a constant rhythmic bass, fades into a soft, ambient hum, then vanishes entirely as the air grows thin. The view tilts upward, expanding to encompass the full reach of the urban grid. From this height, the LittyVerse is no longer a collection of separate districts or labs. It is a unified, pulsing organism of light. The coastlines of the continent emerge, dark and jagged, but the city itself burns with an intensity that defies the surrounding night. It stretches across the land like a glowing web, a testament to the infrastructure of imagination. The curvature of the planet begins to define the horizon, blue and vast, framing the brilliance of the city. The camera continues its ascent, passing through the thin veil of the atmosphere until the entire metropolis is visible at once. It sits upon the Earth like a brilliant, artificial star, a beacon of innovation glowing against the deep black of space. The scale is absolute, the reach is global, and the light from the LittyVerse now defines the silhouette of the world itself. From the silence of high orbit, the city does not merely glow. It radiates a pulse that seems to synchronize with the rotation of the Earth itself. The energy from every district, every lab, and every broadcast tower flows upward, converging in the thin atmosphere above the metropolis. The air begins to shimmer, refracting the light of the city into a concentrated, crystalline form. Slowly, the disparate beams of purple and gold light lock into a precise, geometric alignment. The LittyVerse logo materializes, suspended against the dark curve of the planet, burning with a steady, unyielding intensity. It is no longer just a project or a city. It is a permanent marker on the face of the globe. The light reflects off the clouds below, casting a soft luminescence over the oceans and continents that were once disconnected. This beacon serves as a testament to the shift in human history, proving that imagination could be forged into a tangible, thriving civilization. The world has been irrevocably altered, its borders redefined by the reach of this digital and physical frontier. As the logo holds its position in the firmament, the transformation is complete. The city has changed the world forever, leaving an indelible mark that will shine as long as the pulse of the LittyVerse continues to beat.